and then you'll have about 5 minutes after that.
Cool. All right, should I start?
All right, you can start anytime.
All right. Okay, so for my capstone project, I did a research for personality on social media use. So just a brief overview of my structure of this presentation. I will go over the introduction, methods I used to do the research, the results, and also the conclusion. So in earlier studies, we found out that internet users tend to be nerdy people. So those who don't feel comfortable sitting in front of others, communicate, and try to connect, choose to sit behind the computers, hide themselves from the internet, be another person. So these people with glasses and kind of a little nerdy, tend to be heavier internet users. But now the internet world has changed. Nowadays, as researchers found out, first, the method has been changed. So instead of using just computers, we now have mobiles, iPad, all these kind of tablets. And also, not just nerdy guys use internet, but girls, like fashion icons, also use internet a lot, especially on social media. So my research, there are two main points for my research. One is to study the general usage of social media The other is for 4 main social media platforms. So there are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also LinkedIn. So these 4 main social media platforms, I want to study what people what's the priority for people to use. And here I'll briefly talk about the research method I use. So I did a survey among 320 BYU students. Their major is across 17 different areas and 250 random selected people on the internet. So I want to study the difference between the younger generation, as most of people, we agree that the younger generation is the main target market for social media platforms. And 250 people, they are of different ages, from 10 years old to about 66. I think the oldest one is 66 years old, and also different jobs, different occupations. And the survey questions covers 2 aspects. One is the demographics areas, so like the age, the race, the gender, and income, education levels. And the other one, I will introduce the idea of big 5 personality traits. So it's a really popular and unpopular used idea in the social media studies. And also the big 5 personality traits include, the first one is openness. So openness means if you are open to new ideas, if you are curious and you are creative, do you want to make changes in your life? The second one is conscientiousness. Conscientious means if you are systematic, punctual, organized, achievement-oriented. The third one is extroversion. So extroverted people tend to be talkative, social, really open, and feel comfortable getting around with people. And these are the extroverted people. The fourth one is agreeableness. Agreeableness means if you are kind, warm, trusting, and do you love interacting with people? And the last one is emotional stability, also called as neuroticism. So this is really common in our real life. So if you go to Facebook, there are always some people who want to express their anger, who are so emotionally unstable that they post maybe 15 posts every day. So these are the emotionally unstable people.
Yikes, I better dial back.
And the last one, so this is not one of the 5 personality traits, but also I studied this one. This is the life satisfaction. So see if you are satisfied with your current life. So with this.
So real quick, Olivia, help us out again. You're studying the intersection of social media and these personality types, but how does that help us?
So I will talk about the business values by the end of
Oh,
the
okay,
presentation.
that's fine. I can hold.
Yeah. Okay. So here are the results. So all the green ones, as we can see from here, the extroversion, openness, race, and education are positive predictors, meaning that the more extroverted people are, the more they will use their social media. And the gray ones, white ones here, emotional stability, life satisfaction, gender, income, and age are all the negative predictors. And as we can see, age here is really, really large, meaning that the younger people are, the more frequently they will use their social media. And the strongest positive predictor of social media use is extroversion. And I also studied the correlation between these factors. And it's interesting to see there is a strong correlation with openness and education. So those who are open to new ideas, and it's not hard to understand, those who are open to new ideas tend to be highly educated people. And also income and education. So
this is across all social media.
yes, this is the
systems.
general part.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
And did I read correctly that less emotional stability means you're more likely to use social media?
Yes.
More emotional stability means you're less likely to use social media.
Yes. Yes. So if you are easy to get angry, you're really moody, you tend to use social media more. And for the associations, so to study the associations between different social media platforms, I found out that Instagram and Facebook don't like each other. So those people, so it is no doubt that Facebook is still the dominant platform for this in the social media industry. So about 73% of users, internet users, have Facebook accounts, which is a lot, like more than any other social media platforms. But it's really interesting to see that those people who like LinkedIn, who check their LinkedIn at least one time a week, don't use Facebook as often. And the other association rule comes with Twitter and Instagram. So those who have Twitter accounts tend to have an Instagram account. And it's really interesting. Another fact is in December 2012, Instagram, they announced that they are no longer going to support the integration with Twitter, probably because they found out that the target market of these two platforms are really close and they really want to differentiate themselves. So like Instagram, by stopping the integration, meaning that now if you take a picture, upload it into Instagram, you cannot automatically upload it onto Twitter. Instagram wanted it to be the only tool used to upload the picture and share your life with others. And here are the age distributions for these 4 social media platforms. And Facebook, as we can see here, a lot of people among age 45 to 54. And that's a little weird, but when I dig deeper, these people, even though they have Facebook accounts, they don't use as often as the younger generation. So I was thinking maybe just because all the parents want to register for Facebook accounts and try to stalk their kids, that's the reason they just check weekly, or maybe once a month. But they don't normally post the stuff on Facebook, so they are more like the stalkers. But
yeah, this segment, it was identified, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was by far the fastest growing segment are those, 40 plus, and so
yeah.
I'm excited to see that your data maps to what that,
This is
reality.
your measurement, not a report by these sites.
No, that's my measurement.
Okay. What's the end of your survey? How many people are you talking?
320 BYU students, 250 random select internet users. Yeah. So yeah, these are the numbers I got from my survey. So this one is from 250 internet users because BYU students tend to be in the age range of 18 to 28 probably. So that's why it will mess up the data. So I try to just use the random selected data for this map. So this is the age distribution. And also LinkedIn, it's not surprised to find out LinkedIn, many people are around age 35 to 44 and also 45 to 54 because they're professionals. See, like from 0 age to 17 years old, people don't use LinkedIn because there's no need to use LinkedIn to connect with the professionals. And Instagram, so as I talked about the similarity between Instagram and Twitter, Instagram and Twitter, the population, the age population is actually really different. So Instagram is more like younger people use Instagram. But Twitter, still lots of 35 to 55-year-old people use Twitter. That's because one of the functionality of Twitter is to check news. So many people use Twitter not to share their life, but to check the news, what's going on in the life, and the people aged from 35 to 55 really care about that part. And I also use logistic regression data model to try to find the factors like the personality influence on social media use. And these are, so from left it's extroversion, openness, emotional stability, age, gender, education, and income. And as we can see, like this really low point is Facebook emotional stability. And the one thing is because on Facebook, one of the research I found out is saying on Facebook, 47% of the people on your Facebook, like Facebook friends, are actually the people you know. So probably on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, we are following some people we don't really know. We just want to, maybe they are celebrities, or maybe they are the person who we may want to get help in the later life. But Facebook is for more closed relationships. So that's why Facebook is ranked really low on emotional stability. So if you are trying to express your anger, or madness, just be yourself. You go on Facebook instead of going LinkedIn for sure, and also Twitter and Instagram. And also this high point for LinkedIn, we can see is gender. So generally, women tend to use social media more often.
So how is gender coded? Is 0 male, 1 female? Or?
0 will be 1 to 1, and if it's positive, it's male, and if it's negative, it's female.
Okay.
So Twitter is really female dominated, but LinkedIn, that's what I'm guessing is because still like in today's life, still most in the job area, people in the profession area, still most more than half men, like more men got a job than women. So that's why more male users are on LinkedIn instead of all the other social media platforms.
Quick clarification again, that as far as these different platforms, are you looking at if you have an account or frequency of use of that account? Or
This one is if you have an account.
Okay.
Yeah, but still also this one also started is what do you use for these social media? So that's how I get the emotional stability data. So in my survey questions, I also ask people why are you using this social media? What's your priority of using some particular type of social media? And then logistic regression, one advantage of logistic regression is we can predict the possibilities. So if we look at this person who turned out to be a professor in BYU, age, I'm guessing 35 to 45.
Very good. 36.
Cool. So with all these criteria, we can predict the percentage. So the percentage of this professor to have Facebook account is 77%. That's taking consider of 71% of people have Facebook account, and also Twitter, only 64% of internet users have Twitter account. So given the values of all the variables as I mentioned before in the previous graph, and also the percentage of the general percentage of users, we can calculate the percentage of if people have an account or if they are frequent users. So
So that's actually right on. I have Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, but not Instagram.
Because
I'm just wondering how you rated my emotional stability.
pretty stable.
Your counsel advised you not.
Wise counsel.
Pretty stable. Really open. Yeah. So yeah, is the frequent user that part right? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's probably right. My Facebook recently, I don't think I posted in like 6 months maybe. But Twitter, I do a couple times a week, and LinkedIn, I don't do anything. No, occasionally go out and look and update.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I found out for LinkedIn too. People don't modify their LinkedIn really often. It's just like once a week they just check if some people view their profile or does anyone send them an email. So it's not.
Yeah, some of these probably have some event-related things.
Yeah.
If an event happens in my life, if I go looking for a new job, boom, LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm, referring or writing recommendations for people, but there's probably different events that impact my use.
Yeah. Cool. So. Okay, conclusions. So what we can do so that's what Dr. Mizovi's asked before. So what we can do with the results of my research, we look at Facebook. So Facebook, as I mentioned before, Facebook are for closer relationships. So one idea for Facebook is you don't want to share everything with all groups of people you want to connect with. For example, you don't want to share your conversation with your family to the people you barely know. You just added today. You don't want them to know the information. And so one idea for Facebook, probably they can use some sort of technique to prevent, just to make the information open to the mutual friends. So if me and Dr. Mizovi are friends, and also Adam are also a friend of us, you can see the conversation between me and Dr. Mizovi. But if, say, this professor, he is not a mutual friend with me and Dr. Mizovi, he cannot see it. So that's kind of adding the security to Facebook and to make the conversation more free. And for Twitter, so I figured out Twitter is becoming a new news media for today's media industry. So nowadays, lots of information and lots of news coming from Twitter, and it can be a really great tool for us to share our information and follow celebrities. So as for advertisement, for business values, for advertisement values especially, so the power of celebrities can be strengthened in the Twitter platform. Instagram. So that's just my point of view. I feel like Instagram, their stage is kind of embarrassing now because they are trying to differentiate itself from Twitter and other social media platforms. But the problem is that most people find out Instagram is just like a filter. So you filter your photos and put on Instagram. But there are not a lot of things you can do on Instagram. It is fast compared to all the other social media platforms. But still, there are lots of things. Like today's world, we are looking for something that is fast, that is quick, but still, like Instagram is more innovation. LinkedIn, one problem with LinkedIn is security. So for security perspective, especially because LinkedIn, most professionals are using LinkedIn to share their personal information. The security area of LinkedIn is not that good. It's still really weak, even though they add account protections so that not, like if you guys are not friends, you cannot view the information on the LinkedIn for that one. But still, there are many things they can do to strengthen their security part. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Oh, very good. Okay. What questions do you have?
So, what are the biggest lessons you learned personally out of this project?
One thing I learned is from sending out the surveys. So my goal was to select the randomly selected population to do my survey, but then I realized it's really hard to realize randomly selected, because first I sent out the surveys to BYU students, and then I realized that's too focused, because BYU students is a really small population, because they are young, most of them are white, and they are students. So, and then I go to internet and try to do research to send out surveys across the internet. But the problem with that part is people who will do internet surveys are not randomly selected people. Like people like professors will not do the surveys because they don't have time and they don't want the extra money. Because most of these websites are saying, okay, just register at our website and we will give you money once you did 100 surveys. So their answers may not be accurate, and those people are not randomly selected. So that's one limitation of my research, I think, because the result may be like not 100% accurate.
Do you pay for your survey responses?
I get a really good discount. So like these websites have a trial, so I pay like $10, but it's not a lot.
So when you study the social media, I feel like I just wondering if you have think about expand your research into other, like in a more broad way in terms of social media, like Gmail, Google Plus, like Google Hangout, where people actually they spend their time on there as well.
Yeah, actually I did. So I did an initial survey among BYU students, and I surveyed about 8 social media instead of 4 social media platforms. And some quotes from Google Plus users, they said, I don't use Google Plus unless I'm on Gmail. So that's why I choose 4 of the social media platforms that is more like most typical and can stand for the populations.
So what did you learn from the project that will transfer to your career? You know, what have you learned that really will make a difference in your life?
Don't procrastinate.
Sure enough. Most of us probably learned that lesson before, you know, the capstone class.
And we always need to make motivations. So maybe agile development cycle. So always like, first I didn't think of set out multiple surveys. I was just like, oh, I'm going to set out survey and collect data and analyze the data, boom, done. But it's not. It's like you always need to go back, make modifications, and revise your projects. So, yeah.
Can you show us the questions you used to assess emotional stability?
Sure.
Yeah, that was a well-accepted survey instrument, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one in education. In my mind, the more educated the user is, the less likely they are going to be to use social media. And maybe that's just my security mindset of, I know how insecure it is, and so I don't use it.
Yeah. There might be certain kinds of education that tend to make that factor.
Yeah.
I loved your slides, by the way. Very clean.
Different and unique slides as opposed to the traditional PowerPoint bullet.
Yeah.
Very, very nice.
Thank you.
I think that's using the strength of your culture that tends to be more pictorial than maybe some of the Roman languages. And some students will say, well, I better put a lot of words up there so I know what I want to say. But you did a good job putting pictures up there to convey the idea that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I learned that from my marketing classes.
Very good. A true capstone.
Yeah, if they're not too don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right. Yeah, I just asked about 3-4 questions for each personality type. So I mentioned there are 5 personality types to evaluate people. So about 3-4 questions. So that can be another limitation of my survey too, because it's hard to determine like a person's personality by 3-4 questions for each aspect.
But you took those from well-tested instruments,
Yes.
right, that have been used in previous research?
Yeah, like my original plan was to go to the BYU Personality Test Center, but for some security reasons, they don't let me to take the results. So, yeah.
All right, very good. Okay, on deck is Jeremy with a little bit of computer vision. Yep.
You're recording and everything, huh?
We're just live streaming everything. Yeah.
Why is that image back?
You know what? I'm not positive, but I know when
Because when I watched YouTube, I mean, everything's right.
Yeah, I think I know when I do just webcast, and I don't know why it is, but everything is mirrored. Yeah, that's right. And it might be because you're looking at yourself typically, and so they flip it so that it looks. Wow.
Point to the right side.
Sense.
No, because if you flip this around, the words are backwards.
Yeah. I agree with that. I don't care. Well, but yeah, man. Everyone just enjoyed it. They're a little 360 tours. Have you noticed that with some webcam stuff? They'll be inverted on your machine even though they're not on the others. Okay. I'm glad that that's correct. Out there. Uh-huh.
I use it for WebEx.
Yeah.
I never see myself.
Yeah, that's right.
See whoever I'm talking to on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, as we seek to strengthen ties with one another. There's an opportunity if we've been discussing something. So Jeremy, I'll give you a timer that'll go off 20 minutes. You'll have about 5 minutes after that. Often we've been asking questions throughout, but if you want, we can try to hold them. But my guess is we're a ruckus bunch.
I'll take questions, sir. I'll take mine. I
Sounds
didn't
good.
expect them with this one.
So, you're welcome to go ahead and start at any time.
All right, let's get cracking. So again, my name is Jeremy Penrod. I chose for my capstone a little bit of object recognition, computer vision, which was a big stretch for me. I've obviously never done anything with that before. Apparently there are classes on that on campus. I'd never seen them until my last semester of a 7-year college career. But here we are, and I had to do it the hard way.
People go to school for 9 years.
Yeah. So I picked a very ambitious goal for this project, and kind of find out too ambitious. It was not sort of realistic for 20 hours a week commitment for 2 months. That's really not. He perked up when I said 20 hours. He's like, yeah, for 2 months. Yeah, I mean, you're just not able to write, groundbreaking, awesome computer vision algorithms that quickly. It's a very complicated process, at least from what I've been able to gather. Really a lot different than most programming I've ever done. But let's get into it. So I will actually ask for some questions and feedback here. We have one woman in the room, but I guess this is really a challenge for the men. Throw out things that you notice in this photo. What are some of the information about the dress specifically that we can tell?
Different fabrics.
Different fabrics, or some might say beaded up on the top. Those are little beads. What else we got?
The photo is not centered.
Not centered. She's sort of off to the left. Yep.
Red.
It's red. What color is it, Sierra?
Well, there's 2 different colors.
Okay.
There's like a coral on top and more of like a coral down below and more of like a sherbet. I would flip those. Coral
Okay.
on top, sherbet on bottom.
So this is pretty typical, that contrast. Red, coral, and sherbet.
It's not
So what else do we notice about it?
No sleeves.
No sleeves. Definitely not an LDS dress, right? I mean, it's also got sort of a halter thing going on. It matches up around the neck tightly. It's got straps. It ends above the knee by the looks of things. A lot of information just in that photo. And if all you have is the photo and a file name, you're not able to like pull stuff out of that and use it, especially in search and retrieval type situations or any sort of user-submitted content. A lot of that information is just locked in the photo. We save the photo, but we're not able to pull it out. Apparel search is different for women than it is for men in most cases, where they have more specific criteria in mind that typically isn't there in the metadata. It's very immediately obvious when you look at the photo. So I work at our startup. My partner's here, Craig, and we are a retail search technology company. And we care a lot about the color extraction and finding out as much as we can about the garment. And this is sort of the level our startup is at right now. This is a screenshot of our administrator side of our site. Hello, Internet, I guess. There we go. We do great on big, solid color objects, right? You can tell that's just about right. But it gets more complicated when an arm shows up in the region that we're looking at. We pick up skin tones. Also, things like this. Gray is not the color of the image. It's black with little white things in it, right? So it's really a black dress with some white. These colors are pretty much wrong. Over there, complex thing, got a little bit of arm, a little bit of background, all sorts of weird stuff going on. And so we have a manual vetting process where we actually remove the colors, and we have an eyedropper where we can put in new colors. Very time-consuming, way too time-consuming. And we're branching out of dresses into shoes and all these other things. We'll very quickly in the next 3 months have about 1 million products that we want this information on. Can't be manual. At least we got to reduce at least 90% of it. So that's what we're working on here, and that's what we've been trying to accomplish here. My capstone, I chose to use OpenCV as the image recognition library, image processing library at Dr. Survey's advice, which I'd never even heard of it, which was very frustrating to come find out there's this awesome open source library that helps a lot. I was also using Python, which I'd never used before, which slowed me down a lot, obviously, using a new language, especially Python's NumPy or NumPy syntax. Got crazy matrix manipulation stuff that's very cool, very powerful, and very foreign to me, so pretty much everything was tricky. But we did make it through. So the goal was to use the open source library in Python and get as much as we can out of the image. So before I proceed, I want to talk a little bit about the complexity, because you already heard me whining about how hard it was. I want to talk about why. Here's 2 example images. The one on the left, the human eye immediately understands that those are the same color chairs. They're all a matching set. But if you were to take a computer and just start looking at pixels, tons of different colors going on, even in a mostly white image where nothing's actually white into the computer. But you see the light source just totally messes it up. Over here is another great example of that, where we've got 3 different colors, maybe 4, the red you can kind of see. And up here, red, blue, green, white. Our eye and our brain are able to very silently and successfully and quickly achieve something called color constancy, where we know that this blue is the same as that, this white is the same as that, and this green is the same as this, even though there's crazy different light source shadows going on the other side. We just know that it's the same. The computer doesn't have that benefit, doesn't have this awesome, powerful machine behind it to pull together color constancy and a wealth of life experience to understand that those are the same thing. So really, like, that is an incredibly difficult image to understand from a computer vision standpoint. And that happens. So here's a fun little optical illusion to illustrate this. Who's seen this one before? Just curious. You got 2. Sierra, my wife doesn't count. Okay, so if I told you that squares A and B are exactly the same color, you eyedropper them and they're the exact same color, how many of you think I'm 100% truthful?
Liar!
Thank you. That's the response I wanted.
Yeah.
They are exactly the same hue. Yeah. Exactly. If you eyedropper them, they would be the same. You may not believe me, but allow me to illustrate. Now you believe me. Kind of impressive, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're up against in computer vision. And it's like, man, like, who would have guessed that the dark square has become the light square just because of shadow? I mean, that becomes tricky. Yeah, that's a great image. Sure. All right. So let's look at the kind of images we're going to be processing. We have a couple different kinds going on. The ones on the top I consider simple, not because the pattern on the thing is complex or simple, but because of extenuating circumstances. That one's just a big solid color, super easy, even got a white background. Same here. Pretty simple to figure out what's the model and what's not simple. This one gets a little more complicated, but again, it's still a very solid thing you can work with. And here there's nothing like shading or shadows or arms or anything to make it complicated. So even though the pattern's complex, it's pretty trivial to get the colors. These guys get a lot more complicated. This one is the same color as its background. Awesome. So when we do background removal, there goes the dress. And we're left with arms. So fantastic. This guy, we've got no face. You're not actually able to just, I mean, when you think about computer vision, you're like, all you got to do is just like, oh, grab the arm. No, there's no such thing as grab the arm. You've got to know what the skin tone is. And this could be a super white model, this could be a black model, this could be Asian, Latina, and the skin tones vary drastically, and you can't just have this wide skin tone range because you're going to nuke like a third of your apparel products. So, I mean, you got to be specific, and if you have no anchor point, which the face is typically the anchor because we can't find that, it's pretty easy to find a face, this just gets very tricky very quickly. Not to mention this red hair. I mean, like, how are you going to even know that there's hair if there's no face? Like, I mean, it's just tricky. You wouldn't have thought that'd be a tricky one, but it's very tricky. This one, same issue, but more complicated by the fact that there's a shadow and actually a highlight. So this color is the white in the dress. This is darker than the dress. So I mean, that just makes it tricky, especially since this gray will actually continue pretty much through the dress. So, I mean, you got a lot of issues to work through on that guy. And this one, this is hard. You've got a little region of background, and it's the same color pretty much as the dress. How do you tell this thing automatically that this is not dress and this is dress? I mean, you've got it like, you know, it just gets very, very complicated. So my objective with this was to do 4 things before I could actually do what I wanted to do. First of all, I needed to locate the object in the photo. That sounds so trivial, but it's just not. Second, we needed to remove the background regions, which the last one I pointed at shows the complexity of that. Third, remove skin tone, which especially without a face can be very tricky. And lastly, remove hair, because a model's hair can cover a good, quarter of the dress if, on an unfortunate photo. Once I got those 4 things done, then I can actually do the 2 things I want to, which is take accurate color samples, so we can do search and retrieval, and then look for predefined patterns like chevron and stripes. I'll give you a spoiler, I did not make it to the predefined patterns, because the 4 things that you have to do first took much longer than I would have ever expected. We're going to walk through why. Okay, so step 1, locating the object. We're going to use this image for this walkthrough, I guess. Let's guess here. Who can see the image well enough that they can guess how many regions of background I have to remove from that image or mask out of the image?
Well, depends on your tolerance.
Tolerances, there should be no background left in the image.
I say 5.
5? Dave said 12. Go big or go home. It's actually 5. These are the 5. You've got left and right side, bottom, and then you've got her hair is cutting off a piece of it.
Oh, I see.
Come on, you have to just put your hands down, and then you got a little bit right here between the elbow, and you don't want to consider that a white stripe in the dress or something. You got to take it out.
So, real quick, Jeremy, why the selection and removal of the background before the removal of the skin tones? I think if you remove the skin tones, then more of the background could flow.
You'll see why in a sec. The flow of how I ended up designing the algorithm benefits by doing it this way. I'll come back to that in a little bit, though. It's a good question. So here we go. I'm going to take out those 5 things. How would you go about this? Some people think, well, just sample it, grab the corner, because that's a pretty predictable thing. When you do that, a lot of times what happens is this. You may not have even seen it because it's pretty bright in here, but this is a shadow. Very minor shadow, but it's significantly different than the top and left corners of the image, at least mathematically significant. So we end up with a terrible mask. Does not help us at all. And what's worse is even when it is right sometimes, you can nuke the white in the dress because it's actually the same color. And so now you're left with half your dress missing or sometimes more. That's just not a good enough solution. You just can't rely on a simple threshold like that. So there's, again, no easy answer here. But here's what I ended up doing. I built a custom edge detector, which comes in from the edges of the image and looks for a boundary. And I can adjust the threshold of how sensitive that is. And that can be passed in with an argument with the executable of this program. So if we have different retailers that we know have different backgrounds, we can say, going to need a lighter boundary tolerance on this guy because all their images have this washed out, whatever. So here's what it does. You can kind of see an animation, which took forever to put all those stupid arrows in. But pretty much that's what it is.
Bonus points for that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll do it again, yeah. It took forever, so why not?
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow, super cool. All right. So you can see exactly what it's doing. It took longer than the algorithm, yeah. So, and it'll just leave us with this trace of where the threshold was good enough. So this is the visualization that I used to develop it, which is awesome. And so what this does for you is you know what's background and what's not. And so now we have our background region, including this shadow, which you may not be able to see, but there's a shadow there. And so now I can threshold more intelligently because I know what the object is, I know what the background is. Now there's still background regions, so we still got to deal with that. But now that we've done our awesome intelligent thresholding, we end up with something that looks more like this. That was a cool animation too.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me about, do you build a histogram of the background and then apply, statistical model to, the rest of the pixels in the image to say the likelihood of matching something in the background?
I played with that. I went with a simpler solution after a while. The histograms theoretically sound so awesome and powerful, but I just kept hitting issues that just brick walls every left turn. And so what I ended up doing was just a range check. I take the brightest pixel in the background and the darkest pixel in the known background, and that's my range. So now I've increased typically the range that I think is background rather than just taking the corners. So there's danger in that, obviously. So you have to make sure that the image is a wider gray background. You don't want to take a complex background because your range will then be a huge spectrum of the color spectrum, and you got all sorts of issues. But you can see there's still an issue with it where it was a little bit darker by her inner calf. We have a patch of background that's still there, but to be honest, that's good enough for me. And so I was able to just move on from that point. And this happens to be a rather complex background image, much simpler, especially when it's just white backgrounds. This does phenomenal. So that was our step 2. Step 3, now moving on, is now it's time to take out skin tone regions. Now that I've got this, it's a little bit more simple for me to comprehend pulling out the skin tone region because there's no background to worry about, and I've just got to nuke these certain things. So again, just if you're following along, we're not trying to end up with a beautiful contour of the dress. We're trying to end up with a region that's fabric. So there's going to be all sorts of mutilation, like pieces missing when you take out arms and hair and stuff. Just be prepared for that. That's going to look bad, but it's powerful and it's right. All right, so here we go. First rule of skin tone detection. It's incredibly complicated. There's nothing easy about it. There's no such thing as can't you just. I mean, it's just a complex problem. Come to find out, PhDs are made on this topic, skin tone recognition, and I was an idiot and just thought, oh, I'll just do that, so it was pretty hard. Most of what you read on Stack Overflow and everything are actually PDF white papers published by colleges about color theory and why these things, are the way they are. It's the weirdest programming experiment of my life, not being able to just find Stack Overflow examples and things, but finding research papers. That's the best that they could give you.
Well, I think what you're on is you're highlighting a complex problem where you can really add value to it. It's not just turnkey like most of the stuff that most programs.
There were definitely points where I felt I should post this back on Stack Overflow. Oh wait, I'm going to make that a trade secret and not do that. And I think that's why it is that way. Because once a company's got awesome color, whatever, skin threshold or whatever, they typically get acquired. So, all right, time for some color theory. Most of us operate in the RGB color space. Designers or anything, excuse the terrible and yet wonderful GIF. That was really the best I could find. It's kind of amazing. But most of us, when we talk about, what specific color, it's RGB. Whether it's a hex code, which is just a way to write RGB. This is what we get, XYZ plane, right? The wrong color space for skin tone, completely wrong. So I had to, and I'm familiar with several now because of the stuff we're doing with the dress spot, but I actually had to learn another color space for this because I read white papers on it. This is an example of, or rather, I guess, a depiction of where color or where skin tone falls in different color spaces. So RGB is up on the top. You can see in the RGB cube or whatever, you get a wide belt of skin tones. And that's bad because you want your skin tone pocketed tightly so that you can threshold around it. You don't want to threshold that entire swath because that's a very complex thing to do. You want to keep it close together. And so, here's HSV, does a lot better. Turns out YCBCR, which is what I learned, new color space for me. It's a weird color space that was kind of designed for actually compression of information in telecommunications, as far as I can tell. The sort of fringe color space, but it's used in computer vision, especially with skin tones, because it happens to compress the skin tone range to a very small pocket, which is just really beneficial. So this is what it is. I won't waste everyone's time trying to explain it. It's truly a different beast. And you don't get to just spit it out to see what it's doing. You have to really have this conceptual understanding if you're going to adjust thresholds and not just totally screw it up. Because you don't just mess with Y, which is the luminosity. It doesn't do anything, oddly enough. Y does not mean darker and lighter. Even though that is the luminosity, they've extracted the grayscale into that channel, and it's just like the weirdest thing. So, I mean, the CRCB, chroma red, chroma blue, they have like green and purple and like blue and yellow, and they're just really weird. They're nothing like RGB. But anyway, this is the skin tone I played around in. It took a lot of time, but let's figure out how to do it. Okay, so if we have a face, then it gets a little easier. So this is our model again. If I were to do face detection, it would give me a square slightly smaller than that. And here we go. It's going to get pixelated, but that's okay. What I'll do is I decided to take this piece of skin because there's very rarely models bangs going like this. It happens sometimes, but much less frequently than there is right here. A lot of times the bangs will go down to here. So right here is a pretty decent skin sample. It also has some shading because it's on the nose. You get the highlight and a little bit of darkness, so that's nice. So I pull that little piece out, and we get these like 20 pixels, which may not seem very useful. It happens to be an incredibly useful anchor for pulling out this model's skin tone. Because again, you could have a black model, a super white model, you know, anywhere in the middle. And I happen to know that this one has pretty fair skin because of this swatch. Go ahead.
Do you run into issues because they're models, they're wearing makeup, and you get some variance for, you know, other skin tones that wouldn't be makeup over? Or
you do. I mean, that happens, and I mean, shading and everything can mess with this. But what I do is I take the range, same thing as I did before. I'll take the range, the darkest and lightest pixel maybe, and that's my skin tone range. I'll bump it, and I played a lot with how to find the right way to bump that, so that it'll include things like the side of the arm, which is way darker than that swatch on the nose. To be able to find that, that's why CRCB, TVCR, whatever it is, helps a lot, because you can move a little bit and it won't pick up blues and yellows and things. It will actually just stay in that little pocket. So I ended up doing that, but just manual thresholding a little bit was enough to pick up the rest. So that was actually really exciting.
And the model is churned, and so you only have profile.
We're going to talk about that in a sec. I have slides for you. Hang on. So pretty much, let's try it. We're going to look for everything near those. This is what it finds for us, nice. Which is an amazing mask. We're very happy with that result. That lets us find. Notice though, it picked up her hair. That's because the hair was almost the same color as her forehead, and that's just how it is. It only happens with blonde models. But frankly, I'm perfectly fine if it wants to nuke the hair early in the process because I don't need to hang on to that. So that's a really cool thing. Now, to your question of what happens if we don't have a face, for example, these, it's tricky. It's very tricky. In fact, it's something that I didn't have the resources to build an amazing solution for. So what I did was, okay, cool.
Oh, no, you're good. That's your 5 minute, but we can go longer if you want.
Okay, cool. So what I did is I take the skin tone ranges that I find in white papers, what people typically consider NYCRCB to be decent, and then I'll actually mask that out. But you have to be careful. If it's a peach dress, that will fall within common skin tone ranges. So I actually check of my object that I did that crazy thing to get like that, how much of that was just nuked when I took out skin tones. If it was a lot, then I flag it as this is probably a skin tone dress. It goes in a different bucket to be manually reviewed. I'll still pull the color on it, but it'll likely be halfway between the actual skin tone and the dress. Luckily, usually it's going to be that color, so it still gets to be pretty much automated, but it will need a human to look at it because it trips that flag that I just nuked the dress when I took out skin tone. So it's tricky, and I honestly don't know a better answer, but that one will do for us. So I moved on. Okay, lastly, removing the hair. So we've got our face. We've got that same region. What I can do now is move from the face rectangle up to the top of the ROI, the region of interest, which is that thing I did with the arrows. I'll just lob off whatever the top part is, and then I'll threshold. And I thought, awesome, I'll just threshold whatever's up there. But it turns out a lot of times the hair and the skin are far enough apart that you just nuked like every peach and yellow, so your dress is gone. So you actually have to threshold out skin tones from that little sample, so you're left with just the hair. Then you can do a threshold of that. So that's what that is. All together now, literally what the slide says. Okay, we got the starting image, region of interest, threshold out the background, and then threshold out skin and hair. And what we're left with is this mask, which has just the stuff that we care about. And it's very cool to be able to finally get to that point. Now, obviously, irking everyone right now is that stupid little white triangle at the bottom, and that's just going to have to stay because there are ways around it, but not within the 150 hours I had to give this right now. So I would like to kind of show, just really quickly, open up VirtualBox and just kind of show what it looks like. So if you don't mind, I'll just drag this over to wherever that is. There we are. Okay, I don't know how this will do with the resolution, but okay, so the way it's run right now is just a Python script. For Tuesday, I'll package it into an executable where you have these arguments so you can pass it, and that's how we'll use it at One Spot Shop at our startup. We'll pass it different arguments depending on the retailer. So if we know that there are models but not faces, we will pull out skin tones on all of these. And so they're a reasonable level of non-automation, but knowledge about that chunk of photos will help us get it right, pretty much. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So let's see. If I run this, what it's going to do is over on my my folder here, these are my source images, a bunch of images I've got. It's going to start processing them and rip all the things out of them. It takes, unfortunately, about 15 seconds right now on my super slow VirtualBox. I imagine once we put it on our Amazon server, typically things are at least twice as fast there. But this is the sort of thing that you use a Gearman, worker queue system and farm it out 20 concurrently. We'll definitely set something like that up. But I do have these pre-processed, and you can kind of see the results. Let me see if I can zoom these in a little bit. And you can see the regions that are left are pretty much exactly what we were looking for. Occasionally you'll get background in there and things, but this is a pretty typical, decent example where it nuked a little bit of the white, but you end up with, your blue. And so there was a model in that dress, there was a background with shadows, and it's all gone. And now we're able to run our analyses. So that's where we're at. I've also started working on the color extraction part. At this point, it's histograms and things. And I've got it pretty good, especially for solid color things like this. It's really doing awesome, or big chunks of color. Complex things with lots of little patterns, you get some weird stuff because the pixels blur together, and you get the border. Like if it's red and blue, little repeating patterns, you get a lot of purple. Fortunately, I've been able to use an algorithm built into OpenCV that will detect edges. And I just delete all the edges, so it's only left with the red and blue. The purple's all annihilated, and that's helped a lot. But it's not quite to the level I would love it to be at, where it's able to take a very complex little red and blue pattern and pull out the true red and blue. It's still sort of averaging a little bit, just because the dress itself, the photo itself, does that. But I want to try and play with the threshold and bring it to the higher saturated pixels, because those are typically truer to the color that we identify. And that's sort of the next step here. After that, the last step is to create some custom classifiers like chevron. You create a triangle sort of thing, and just look for it in this result. And if it shows up, then you have a pretty good probability that it's a chevron dress. So not super complicated once we got to this point. But getting here, man, was a real gauntlet. So anyway, that's where it's at. I'm very happy with it, to be honest. Learned a lot from this, a lot about the complexity of it, a lot about Python. It's been an awesome learning experience, but that's pretty much where we're at. So any other questions you want to hit me with, far away.
Very good first.
So Jeremy, I have a couple of questions. Right? So have you looked at what it would cost to use mechanical turf to go farm this out stream in the Philippines or wherever?
That's definitely not that expensive. We've looked into it. I mean, me and Craig both served in the Philippines, and we know exactly how much it could cost. But we are a retail search technology company, and acquisition is always something you want to keep on the horizon. And the more you can pull off stuff like this, the more interested people get.
That's true. And this has the benefit that even if you were doing a mechanical turf solution, you can turf this stuff instead of the other stuff. So whatever pre-processing you've done is helpful. I think this could be a really interesting source of competitive. So congratulations.
Thanks.
It seems like when you're doing your edge detection, you could probably do some thresholding based on. So you've seen how maybe in Photoshop you have the different edge algorithms, and let's see it snap to various boundaries.
Right.
It seems like you could maybe use some shape heuristics to say this is in the shape of the dress, so this is the one I think is more likely, or this one that's just an odd protrusion that's not a shape I see a lot.
Right.
So I think that there are some other techniques you can still apply. But you could put multiple PhDs on this kind of a project, and they could go for months.
We actually have multiple PhDs on this project, as a matter of fact. We they didn't help me with this, but as soon as I started this project, well, I'll be honest, not quite as soon as I started the project, but a month into it, I went to the computer engineering department because I saw a random article had been posted on Do I Use a News Release page about a smart learning algorithm that can detect objects. I wanted to go talk to that professor and get tips for this. He ended up getting sucked into the project and really to be with our company for the long term, which is a really awesome development for us.